We can do a minute of silence for SPB and we can talk about he being a friend of SPYM.
Yesterday also we did that during the project management workshop.
Ramesh, you want to take the lead? Ramesh, can you go ahead and announce that?
Yeah. Welcome everyone, I think, to today's Guru Manthan. Before I hand over to Praveen, I think it's important, we've lost somebody who's been not just a very close uh, person for SPIM and BD, but somebody who's also been extremely close, and a person who's changed the lives across the globe in more ways than one. A person who, and particularly for SVM, he's somebody who we've held not just in high esteem, but in also great affection. We're talking about Sri S.P. Balasubramanian, who unfortunately, passed away yesterday. One more victim of this ongoing crisis that most of us are going through. Therefore, I would request all of us, all of you to join us in a minute's silence for the departed soul. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. As we wait for Ms. Uma Mahadevan to log in again, I'll just run through the initial opening remarks. As you might be, as most of you might be aware, this series Guru Manthan will be on every Saturday for 50 weeks. And this is being organized by the Vivekananda Institute for Leadership Development, where we engage with partners from across sectors, stakeholders from across multiple sectors, with a primary motive of developing human and social capital to build a resurgent India. Now, this particular series, the Guru Manthan series, is actually being organized as a series of lectures to bring in diverse perspectives as well as practices in the education sector. We have had experts, policymakers, practitioners already speak on this. This is the 9th lecture of this series. So far, we have had the first lecture starting from by Dr. Gurraj Karjagi, going on till the last week's lecture by Sri Anil Swarup, the former Secretary of MHRD. Today we have Ms. Uma Mahadevan with us, another IAS officer. Most of you might recollect her work in the women and child development sector, especially her contributions to actually experimenting in the field of women and child development. She has traveled extensively across the state, and people who follow her on Twitter or read her blogs might know, might have read quite a bit about her. So today she will be sharing her views on the early childhood care and education, how it has evolved over the years, and the way forward, especially in the context of the new policy and in the changing the scenarios of the early childhood care component being discussed. There is a discussion about being transferred from the women and child development sector into the education, Ministry of Education. So in that context, I think it will be very important or very relevant to have this discussion at this point. Over to you, ma'am.
Has she come online?
Yeah, I see her name here. Before ma'am joins in, just as a reminder, with today's lecture, we would be completing 2 months of the Guru Manthan series, and we have a very interesting month lined up next month, and we would be starting with a lecture by Dr. Ananta from the Mahatma Gandhi Institute of Education for Peace and Sustainable Development. It's a UNESCO, it's a body under the UNESCO. And he'll be talking about emotional and social education and skills. Then we have Mr. Giridhar, who is a registrar of the Azim Premji University, again talk about a book which he has written after traveling across India about the teachers, and the book very aptly titled Ordinary People and Extraordinary Teachers. Then we have Professor Annamalai, who was formerly the director of the Central Institute for Indian Languages. He'll be talking about the value of language in education. This is again a very hotly debated topic. And the fourth lecture next week would be from an alternative school where the Kalkeri Sangeet Vidyalaya are running in near Dharwad, where they...
Praveen, you may unmute Uma. So she's sent me a message saying she's not been unmuted. So can you check and unmute?
Okay, yeah. And Dr. Adam Woodward would be talking about it. And then the last lecture of this month would be Dr. Praveen Kumar, who would be talking about education as a means to create an equitable society. So I'll just unmute ma'am.
Is she signed in her name or?
Yes.
Can you see her name?
Yeah, I can see her.
Okay, then I can unmute her. I think she'll be able to join. Sorry about that, Uma. We didn't realize you signed in. Is there a problem, Praveen?
I'll just check it.
I think it's his family iPad or something.
Yeah, I've done that. Yes, ma'am. You're audible.
She's unmuted?
Yes.
Okay. We couldn't name your signed in. That's very good. Sorry about this.
No problem. No problem. Thanks a lot. So, should I start?
Yes, ma'am. As the normal practice is, we have 3 sections in this lecture. The first 20 minutes or so would be 20-25 minutes would be a lecture from your side, followed by a Q&A, a moderated Q&A session from the questions picked up from the audience and otherwise. And finally, about 5 minutes of closing remarks from your side. And as I had briefly kind of mentioned that this is a series of lectures we have had with policymakers, practitioners and educationists. And we are interested in listening to your views on early childhood care and education, where we are and what is the way forward.
Right, right. Thank you. At the outset, thank you so much to Dr. Balasubramaniam and to the Swami Vivekananda Youth Movement, as well as to VLead, for inviting me. Thank you, Praveen, for introducing. And congratulations on Guru Manthan, which is a really important initiative to keep a connect with teachers, educators, and all of us working in the education and development community during this difficult time. It's been a very difficult year, 2020. Not only the COVID pandemic, but also the associated difficulties of control measures and economic difficulties and large-scale migration, school closures. It's a difficult time for everybody. And I think we're all still trying to, both the state, the social sector, the NGO sector, civil society, all of us are trying to still find our way through this very difficult period. I myself, just to add a personal note, have just recovered from COVID and I'm still recovering. I had a hospitalization. It's a difficult time, and I think staying connected through these kind of intellectual discussions and planning and thinking about policy interventions, both from the state as well as from civil society, for a future which will be post-COVID, hopefully sooner rather than later. I think that's a very important way of keeping solidarity, keeping our spirits up, and also using this time very, very effectively and efficiently, responsibly, to plan for the difficult times that will lie ahead, because there are challenges that lie ahead. The fact that children are away from school for such a long time, the fact that parents have been in so much economic difficulty, the fact that livelihoods are also under stress, that migration has caused, reverse migration has caused families to have to shift from urban centers to rural areas, where they have, after many, many years, where they again have to build up their lives and build up their livelihoods. I think as responsible members of the development community, both state actors as well as non-state civil society, all of us, and educators most importantly, all of us need to really keep our spirits high and plan systematically for the future. And in this context, I'm really happy that Guru Manthan series has taken the initiative to invite policymakers to share experiences and to think about, as a group, for us all to think about what we can do to prepare for the post-COVID challenges, because those challenges will come and they will be difficult and we will have to face them together. So briefly, before I start, I don't have a prepared lecture as such. I usually talk about ICDS in a general context, and then I speak specifically about Karnataka. ICDS, it's been a great privilege for me to work in Karnataka as Principal Secretary, Women and Child Development, because I think it's, if I had to list among the top 3 programs of the government in India, I would say ICDS is one of the top 3, most important, most relevant, closest to the people. And that's why it's been a great pleasure and a privilege and an honor for me to work in ICDS, to work in WCD, and to lead the program in a large state like Karnataka, and to try and bring some new interventions. I'm also happy for this very special time to share these interventions with you all. ICDS is Integrated Child Development Services, and the program is often regarded and described as the largest such program of its kind in the world. It is. But I think we need to go beyond that one statement and understand more in detail about what is ICDS, why did it come into place at the particular time that it did, and what has it done so far, what has been the journey of the scheme so far. Because, why do I say ICDS? Because although the title of my talk is really ECCE, but early childhood care and education in India is bundled into this really large scale program called the ICDS, which has 14 lakh Anganwadis, 1.4 million Anganwadis, and 28 lakh educators, Anganwadi workers and helpers, 28 lakh of them, 2.8 million of them, working across the country in looking after the youngest of our population and the future generation of India. Therefore, I think it's extremely important to understand ICDS if we want to understand what we are doing in early childhood care and education in India, and what we can do, what we need to do. ICDS started in India in the 1970s, as we all know, but it's always good to remember these, go back to the basic foundation of such programs. It started as a nutrition program at a time when India was undergoing a period of great food insecurity. However, even when it started, this was in the 1970s. It started on October 2nd in 1975, and Karnataka was one of the states which was privileged to have a pilot program of the ICDS. 100 Anganwadis were started. I think it was in T. Narsipura in Mysore. And thereafter, in Karnataka, as all over the country, phase by phase, over the years, we have grown to a very large program. As I said, all India, it's 1.4 million Anganwadis. But in Karnataka, it's 66,000 Anganwadis, and approximately 66,000, 65,911 is the exact number. But after that, we were successful in convincing the state. ICDS is a Government of India shared program with the state, but we were successful in a couple of years ago when I was in WCD in convincing the state that in places where we need more Anganwadis, the state needs to fill the gap. Even if Government of India has closed the program expansion for the time being, the state needs to come forward. So we started 450 more urban Anganwadis in Karnataka. It started, as I said, as a nutrition program at a time of food insecurity, but it also had a history before that. How did Anganwadis first start? So the history actually, and I've written about it, in the Hindu, and I'm sure Praveen can share the link later. It's available on my Twitter account as well. It's the pinned tweet on top. I've written about the history of ICDS, and the history of ICDS is extremely important because it shows that in the 1970s, when this intervention was designed, it did not come just like that without a background. It did not come out of no context at all. It came after a history of several decades of work by Gandhian educators during the freedom struggle, even before 1947, who did a lot of work to develop the concept of Anganwadis and Balwadis as early childhood care centers with a bit of feeding, with a bit of learning, with a bit of looking after the children in tribal areas in Maharashtra. Thereafter, with the Gandhian educators, we also had a period of interaction with Maria Montessori, who was, Montessori founder of the Montessori system of education, who was in India between the wars, and she was in Chennai, and she trained a whole lot of, I think around 1,000 educators in India itself, who went thereafter to different states and started working on early childhood. We also have a history, and it's important to remember the history of these things, that none of these are, entirely borrowed Western concepts. We have a rooted history of concern about education, concern about children, concern about the way in which children learn in India. If it was Gandhi, it was also Savitribai Phule who started a school. It was Rabindranath Tagore. It was J. Krishnamurti. A lot of people have given, today's Vidyasagar's birth anniversary, and a lot of people in India, in our history, have worked on the idea of the philosophy of education, how children should be educated, where should they be educated. And today when you see in Karnataka, you see open air classrooms outside the trees, under the trees, Vidyagama program, and you think back to the days of Tagore Shantiniketan, because that is a model for open air education. So ICDS itself has a very long history in India, and India has now extended it over the years with the Supreme Court taking up a series of public interest litigations. There have been 3 major phases of expansion in the ICDS, and now it is 1.4 million Anganwadis. The program is sponsored by the central government, but it is shared, the costs are shared between the center and the state. Earlier, it was shared on a 90-20 basis, but over the years, the sharing pattern has changed. It is 60-40 in some cases, and in some parts of the program, like salaries of the project staff and so on, the sharing pattern varies to 25-75 and so on. Anyway, that is just the nuts and bolts of the ICDS program. What does the ICDS do? It's, as I said, it's the Integrated Child Development Services. And integrated is a very important word. It's not only child development. Child development is not just one thing. It's not that you can just feed children and expect them to grow healthy and happy. It's not that you can just give children stimulation without giving proper nutrition and expect them to grow healthy and happy. It's not just that you can give them food and you can give them stimulation without immunization. So children require an integrated basket of services. And this integrated basket of services starts even before the child is born, because we know that mothers in India tend to be undernourished. Many of them tend to be child brides. They tend to have anemia. They tend to have other, low BMI. And therefore, they tend to be at risk during pregnancy. Karnataka itself still has a higher maternal mortality and infant mortality rate compared to other southern states. And therefore, the ICDS has been conceived as a program which integrates a basket of services: maternal nutrition, nutrition education, immunization of the child, supplementary nutrition for children as well as for mothers, as well as non-formal early childhood education. Please note that ICDS, as the program was originally conceived, never talks about preschool education. Preschool is a term which defines the early years in terms of school. This is something that a lot of educators actually have a concern about, because early childhood is a period which is very different from school. And therefore, it is not schoolification of early childhood that we should talk about. We should talk about non-formal early education. That is also part of this thing. It's also in Karnataka especially, but in other states as well, increasingly during the National Nutrition Mission, it's also important to do growth monitoring. It's not only important to feed a child, to ensure that the child is eating healthy and having immunization. We need to also do growth monitoring. This is one of the things that developed countries tend to do very well. High-income countries tend to do very well. They monitor the growth of children regularly, the height, the weight, the mid-upper arm circumference, to see that children, in developed countries, perhaps MUAC is not, MUAC is not so relevant, but certainly in a developing country with drought-prone areas like Karnataka has, or with food insecurity, mid-upper arm circumference for nutritional security is also an important part of monitoring. And therefore, growth monitoring is another part of what the Anganwadi does. So really, now I'm coming to the term Anganwadi. All this is done actually by the Anganwadi and at the Anganwadi. And therefore, when we talk about ECC, we should embed it in this context, that these are all the different complex things which need to happen. The mother needs to have proper nutrition. The mother needs to have proper hemoglobin. The mother's anemia needs to be managed. The mother needs perhaps some cash transfer to help her during the institutional delivery, to help her during the time when she needs to go for her antenatal checkups. These are the things. All of this is brought together under the umbrella term called ICDS and Anganwadi services. Karnataka, as I said, has 66,000 Anganwadis. These are largely rural, but there are also tribal projects. We also have 3,500 mini Anganwadis approximately. Each of the mini Anganwadis have one staff each, because they have less than 10 children. But the rest of the Anganwadis all have two staff. There's one Anganwadi teacher, and then there is one Anganwadi helper. These are honorary workers. They get paid a small amount as per the ICDS guidelines, but different states have topped up the money. I'm happy to say that Karnataka pays 10,000 rupees per month. We have increased from state resources itself, we have increased the monthly honorarium paid to Anganwadi teachers and also for helpers. We have also increased, because they are not civil servants, they are honorary workers without the usual security of work and benefits that typical permanent government staff have. So therefore, what we also did was, recognizing that in order to have a good, well-functioning early childhood system, you need to first have a well-functioning workforce. a very professionalized and well-functioning workforce, recognize and secure workforce. So within the constraints of what the state could make available, we increased the medical reimbursement to 50,000 rupees for both of them. We made an online system of recruitment so that there would be less harassment and less problems during their recruitment. And we brought a number of other innovations in smoothening the working conditions of Anganwadi workers and helpers. In addition to this, we also have an Anganwadi committee. Now, this is a very important part of how an Anganwadi is managed. Since the Anganwadi, if you think about it, more than the number of ration shops in India, more than the number of primary schools in India, more than the number of panchayats in India. Even panchayats are only 2.5 lakhs, but Anganwadis are 14 lakhs. Therefore, if you look at it, the Anganwadi is the service delivery point of the government, which is the most decentralized in India. If you look at Karnataka, it has 20,000 fair price shops, but it has 66,000 Anganwadis. It has 45,000 schools, but it has 66,000 Anganwadis. Therefore, every hamlet, every village ideally, because what was the original plan for a design of an Anganwadi? A mother has to bring the child to the Anganwadi and leave the child there. The child is going to be less than 6. Typically, if the child is 3 years old, you cannot expect the child to walk a very long distance. Therefore, the Anganwadi needs to be in a place which is accessible to the mother as well as to the... So, the Anganwadi committee, therefore, coming back to this, it becomes a very important part of how the Anganwadi is run, because if it is the most decentralized service delivery point of the government's welfare services, then it is in the heart of the community. And who should run it? It should not be the government which runs it. It should be the community which participates actively in running it. Therefore, what we did was we revamped the committee and we made it such that a mother of a child, different mothers are members. One mother of a child in the Anganwadi is the chairperson. A pregnant woman, one breastfeeding mother are also members. One Kishori, that is an adolescent girl, because the Anganwadi also caters to them. We also said that we want at least one father of a child to be a member, and we want one grandmother of a child. Why is that? Because one more interesting thing about the Anganwadi, again, this is different from a school. A school is a formal environment, but across the world, wherever you see where early childhood programs have succeeded, whether it is New Zealand, whether it is the Perry program in the US, whether it is Ireland, the best early childhood programs involve the family and involve the community. And they have a very high degree of parent engagement and community engagement in order to ensure, because if you think about it, the Anganwadi is the first place that the child is stepping into, which is outside the house without the parents. That is the first moment when the child is stepping into the community. And therefore, instead of taking the child directly into school, what we do is the Anganwadi becomes a midway place where the child is between the home and the school. And this is a place which is more informal than the school, but it is little more formal, little different from the house. Therefore, if you go to Uttar Kannada, you'll see so many districts, not just Uttar Kannada. You'll see grandmothers are walking. I still remember in Karwar district I went, I saw one grandmother walking with her child. She was a Gaudati, Halaki Vaklika lady, and in her traditional attire, she was walking with her grandchild. And I asked her, she brings the grandchild to the Anganwadi. She sits there the whole day because the child is still settling. And then in the evening, she goes back. So this is how they are. Now, you will not have this happening in a school, but you know that a child, a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old child who has to settle requires, we cannot just forcibly, violently take away the child into the Anganwadi environment. This is the speciality and this is the magic of the Anganwadi. This is the wonderful thing about the Anganwadi, that you can make it informal. So that's an important part, and that's why the Anganwadi committee has fathers, it has grandmothers. It also has Also, we recognize that grandmothers are the children, are the first teachers of the children, even along with the mother, because typically it's the grandmothers who are looking after the small children while the mother goes out to do the Mahatma Gandhi Narega work or whatever work in the field or garment factory or whatever. And therefore, the child is learning songs, the child is learning language, the child is learning stories from the grandmother. Therefore, we want the grandmother to be very much a part of the Anganwadi committee. So this is the Bal Vikas Samiti. Along with that, we also have supportive supervision by the office staff, by the lady supervisors. There are around 25 Anganwadis supervised by one supervisor. In Karnataka, the Anganwadis run from 9:30 to 4 because they also function as partial daycares. This is very important. When we talk about, I sometimes talk about education, talk to education experts, and they want this, total focus only on learning instead of on giving milk to the child, on giving food to the child. They say all that is taking away the time. But, it is before the child is 5 years old, the child is learning how to hold a glass of milk. That is also learning. The child is learning how to eat a boiled egg without putting all the pieces on the ground. That is learning. The child is learning to put her shoes at the door, at the side neatly, and then come inside. So this is also part of learning. She's learning not only gross motor skills in terms of putting her shoes, she's also learning about how to live a structured life and an organized life. And this is also an important part of learning. And therefore, I always feel that early childhood education in the Anganwadi integrates all of these different aspects. So food is a very important part of the learning. My children went to a play school in Bombay, where similarly it was run by some very, very enlightened educators, alternative kind of educators with PhDs in early childhood. And the same thing was happening there. There also, there was a big table at the center, and the cooking would happen at the side. The children would learn how to pour their milk, how to drink their milk, how to eat their cookies. And this is an important part of learning, because children are learning to become little people. They are learning to hold their glass. They are learning to share. They are learning to eat their eggs. And they are learning that nutritious food is an important part of how they are growing. So Anganwadis in Karnataka give milk. They give sprouts at 11:30. They give 2 eggs a week to the children. They also give lunch to the children. They teach the children to wash their hands before the meal, after the meal, so on. After that, they have a nap. Before the nap, they have a little bit of storytelling to the children. And this forms the part of non-formal early education. Now, what is good early education? Good early education, non-formal early education, depends upon certain things. It first depends on the physical environment of the Anganwadi. The first job of an Anganwadi or a school is not, just like we have Maslow's hierarchy of needs for all of us. For all of us, before we read a very intellectual book, we need to drink water. We need to eat food. We need to be safe. We need to be well nourished. If there is a huge rainstorm happening in our building, and if the whole floor is flooded, we will not be sitting on top of a bed and reading an intellectual book. We will make ourselves safe. Just like that, the first need of the child is well-being and safety. And the Anganwadi should provide the well-being and the safety of the child. The second need is for a good workforce. You cannot have a lady who's beating the children or who is unable to care for the children because she has no training. You need to have a good workforce who is well looked after, because this is early childhood care. Caring professions require the staff themselves to know that they are also cared for, and therefore they can care for the children. If a person is already insecure and thinking about her own pay, her own salary, her own benefits, and having so much of a struggle, she will not be in any condition to teach the children. And it's also a very unjust thing to do. Therefore, it's very important to look after the workforce, given that there are so many constraints. It is not easy for a developing country or a state with so many financial constraints, or for a country with difficulties and challenges. But given all of those challenges, we need to do what we can in order to improve the working conditions. We also need a good program support structure. We need to get into details. For example, as I said, lady supervisors. Now, if a supervisor has to supervise 25 Anganwadis, you cannot only expect her to be taking the bus and going to remote Anganwadis. She'll take a bus and go in the morning. She'll be able to come back only in the evening. That means she can visit only one a day. So what we did was we brought a mobility program for Anganwadi supervisors where we would give a loan, interest-free government loan, for them to buy a two-wheeler of their choice. And we would give some training. We would give fuel allowance of 1,000 rupees per month. Many Anganwadi supervisors have started taking that program, and that is helping them in order to, there you don't have the burden of the maintenance and so on of the vehicles on the government. So you also have family engagement activities, which I've already spoken about. You have to have an age-appropriate, developmentally appropriate curriculum. Now, this is very important. You cannot be giving the children worksheets and expecting them to be writing preparation for IIT JEE at this time. That is not what early childhood education is. Therefore, you need to have a complete focus on physical, social, emotional, and intellectual development of the child. The child needs to learn to share. The child needs to learn to stand in line. The child needs to learn to look after the next child. These are all part of important learnings in the Anganwadi. So structure, routine, agenda, shoes at the door, bottle in the basket, bag in the corner. This is all part of learning because they are learning how to live as organized people. They also learn about sharing. They learn about hand washing. They learn to eat independently. They learn to say that they need to go to the toilet. These are all part of making children independent and making them assert their needs and assert their voices. Along with that, we need to understand that children are best understood in the context of their family, their culture, their community, and their society. So when we are teaching, there are certain lessons that are there in the early childhood curriculum framework. For example, we start with learning about me, my name, my body, my hands, my eyes, my legs, my family, my community, my neighborhood, my village. Then we keep doing concentric circles. My Gram Panchayat, my district, my state, my country. Then we talk about the trees, the plants, the animals, the birds. We take them on nature walks. We take them to the park. We take them to the temple. We take them to the church. We take them to the post office to teach them what different people are doing. And that, as part of all the activities, they inculcate gross motor skills. They learn fine motor skills. They play with balls, they play with patterns, colors, sequencing, stacking, shapes. There is story time. Bringing all this together, joining the dots of all this is what early childhood education is all about. Not any one thing, but putting it all together. And that is the challenge and that is the wonder of early childhood education. I'll stop here. There are many other things and I could go on, but I think that I've already seen a number of questions coming up. And so I think we can now move to a question mode so that that will clarify some doubts. Back to you, Praveen.
Thank you, ma'am. Between me and Ramesh, we will pick up questions from the audience and we'll club them together. To start off, you have put across a very a comprehensive picture of how an Anganwadi is functioning. And there is another extreme of how would a private kindergarten school would function. Now, both of them are seen as early childhood education, if not care and education, definitely as education. There seems to be a lot of disconnect or a lot of, should I say, too much of flexibility when it comes to the curricular structure of what happens or how an early childhood educational system should function. Now, the new NEP does talk about it. It brings in some recommendations, and my question on this is, in 2017, there was an impact assessment study which was brought out, which talked about so much, access no longer being an issue, but the quality of what happens in an early childhood setup, care or education setup, that is a matter of concern, whether it is a private kindergarten school or a government Anganwadi setup. So how do we streamline that and how do we make learning much more fruitful? learning need not necessarily be defined by the 3 R's, but how do we make it more fruitful?
Sure. So as I said, you're very right. That's a very insightful point that there is a quite a large difference between the way in which early childhood education is transacted in Anganwadis, in the ICDS system, and in private preschools. Within the Anganwadi system itself, as I said, because we have such a huge country and such a large number of Anganwadis and such a large number of states, and the states have such a big role to play, that we have quality differences even within states. I would typically say that southern states are doing much better. That's known and generally accepted. But also states like Rajasthan, Chhattisgarh have started doing some very, very interesting work on Anganwadis, on improving Odisha, for example, improving the quality of services being provided. Again, I will not look at education as an isolated thing. Learning is about a lot of things. Learning happens over, I mean, even today, when children are out of school and not going to school, I would not say that they are not learning. They are learning a lot of other things. They are possibly learning at home. They're learning to play with each other. They're learning about first aid. They're learning about the environment. They're learning on nature walks. They're learning. So children are like little sponges. They keep learning all the time. Question is, how can we best mold that learning in a systematic way? One of the best things to do is to have an early childhood curriculum framework. Not to have a curriculum per se, but a framework. A framework, because teaching early childhood education requires a lot of imagination and empathy from the teacher, and it also requires a lot of customization within the Anganwadi environment. A tribal Anganwadi in, say, Nagarhole forest may be very different from a Anganwadi in a remote part of Bidar. The way in which the songs that are chosen, the music and movement activity which is chosen, the stories, the language, the nature walk, the field trips, all these will be very different. However, a curriculum framework will allow the educator to innovate within a certain guided system of teaching. And therefore, I think it's very important. We had done some work in Karnataka when I was there. I'm not sure about whether it's been, I'm sure it's being continued, but I'm not sure if it's been completed. We had put together a team to bring an early childhood curriculum framework together for all Anganwadis across. We do have a Chili-Pili curriculum as such for ICDS, but making it a more holistic curriculum framework along with learning activities was still being, because you have the 25% best Anganwadi teachers, they already design their own activities. They're already very imaginative. You have the 25% who are very demotivated at the other end, who are difficult. But in between the 50%, if you can start motivating them with structured activities, they will carry it out in a very systematic way, and you will see the difference happening. About NEP, I don't really know. I've been a little unwell because of COVID, so I haven't read the detailed NEP document. I think it's very welcome that the NEP recognizes the importance of early childhood education. I've always said that Karnataka and India realized the importance of primary schooling towards the end, in the 90s, towards the end of the 20th century. And the 21st century should be the century of early childhood education. The importance of early childhood education, because majority of poor parents don't have the time to give the child the stimulus, the stimulation, the activities, to play with them, to talk to them instead of talking at them. Because language development, oracy, listening skills, speaking skills, all these things depend on early childhood stimulation. And therefore, extending the Anganwadi hours, providing for stimulation within that time is very important. About private preschools, I would like to say that there is something where I think education community needs to do a lot more outreach with parents. Parents seem to think that education is a race. I don't blame them. The way our system has been designed in our country, we have so many people trying for small number of, university positions and so on and so forth. Therefore, people always think that everything is a race. Education is not a race. A child will learn to walk at the time when that child is developmentally ready to walk. In the same way, a child will learn to read at the time when the child is ready to read. One child may learn to read at the age of 4. That doesn't mean that that child has any inherent advantage over a child who learns to read at the age of 6. Every child learns to read at the later point. There is research, this has been backed by research, that if some children learn to read at the age of 8, because they are not developmentally ready for it, they are not any worse off than a child who has learned to read earlier. So therefore, that's something that parents must work on, and the education community must work on, reducing that sense of anxiety, and then putting small children at tables and making them bend over worksheets and write, ABCD 20 times, write words 20 times, teach cursive. I think we should realize that we're in the 21st century. We are now, a country which is looking at being a world leader in education, along with other things, and therefore we should learn. See, in the 20th century, we all went through this. All our parents put us through, studying science and studying this and trying to become doctors, engineers, because that's what the country needed. Today, the country needs imaginative, empathetic, collaborative, inquiring minds. That is what India needs to become a world leader, to develop this country further, and to face the challenges. Can we face the challenge of a pandemic, or of economic crisis, or of climate change without collaboration and imagination? Certainly not. And therefore, sitting at a worksheet is not going to help the child. Learning to work in a group, learning to look at the environment, going out on a nature walk, learning to be unafraid and take risks, be adventurous. These are the things that are going to teach children. And this is what even private preschools need to start looking at. And the entire education community, whether it is we should stop actually, even when I say collaborate, maybe we should also collaborate between the public sector and the private sector education community. And I'm happy to see that that's also part of the NEP, that a collaborative mindset needs to not only be taught, it also needs to be modeled. And therefore, if we can collaborate as the education community, I think we will be taking this dialogue a lot further. Back to you.
Thank you, ma'am. One question, you did talk about, creating facilitating environments in the Anganwadi system or in the private schools for the young minds to bloom. Now, to create such an environment, we need the facilitators to be equipped with the necessary skill set. And we have a couple of questions here. One is, you did mention that Anganwadi teachers are actually honorary workers who are paid a small honorarium. And on the other side, we are pushing them more towards actually playing the role of a teacher. So we have the diploma program and the bachelor programs in education. And somewhere in between these two extremes is where our Anganwadi workers are caught, and time is always something of a shortage in an Anganwadi center. So how equipped is our system as a whole, whether it's the Anganwadi workers or the teachers in the primary school, to actually cope up with this?
So one of the very exciting things that we did when I was in WCD, it has been helped by the National Nutrition Mission also giving phones to Anganwadi workers. Karnataka has also got its phones now, and very soon the Anganwadi workers will be getting smartphones. We said that we will reduce, Anganwadi workers have a lot of, we did an ethnographical study of, observational study of what all work the Anganwadi worker has to do through the day. And it was observed over scores of Anganwadis and scores of days, so that we got all the nitty-gritty and all the details. We found that they are writing 11 registers, they are following cumbersome process, referring a child, a SAM child for PHC referral and then follow up and so on. Very, very cumbersome, very complicated. Systems are not integrated, processes are not integrated, and IT platforms also not integrated. And therefore, we said that what we must do is we must design an application, a platform, and we called it Sneha. There's a group in Bangalore which worked on it, Solution for Nutrition and Effective Health Access. We said that to fight the problem of malnutrition first, because we found that malnutrition is the wicked problem. We talk a lot about learning and learning deficit, and then in third standard, children are not doing second standard textbook, they're not reading, fifth standard, they're not reading, all this. But all this comes from malnutrition. Malnutrition during the first 1,000 days is what leads to cognitive impairment, which can very rarely be redressed at a later stage fully. And therefore, the idea is if you first solve the wicked problem of malnutrition, you will be equipping children to learn better. If their brains are well developed in the first 1,000 days, they will be, including the time when they are still not born, including the time when maternal nutrition, then you will be solving the wicked problem of malnutrition and preparing children to have better language development, better cognitive development, less deficits, and do better. Regarding Anganwadi workers, Karnataka recruits at standard 10 is the educational qualification for Anganwadi workers. But many of our Anganwadi workers have been graduates, they have been PUC, and they have studied further. What we did and how we did this is that we designed their career progression in such a way that once they complete a certain number of years, they can apply to join as supervisors against a vacancy by fulfilling certain conditions and also by writing an examination. So they will therefore move from honorary positions to civil service positions. So that career progression is very important, and that's part of what I was talking about, professionalization. We also have some very good training collaborations in the North Kalyan Karnataka districts. We have a training collaboration with Tata Trust, with Kalika, and that's going very, very well. We also started a training collaboration with UNICEF and with Azim Premji Foundation. We have training collaboration with United Way, with Save the Children, with Akshara Foundation, 100 Anganwadis at a time. These are going very well. And therefore, I think there is no need, as I said, the Anganwadi, the strength of the Anganwadi is its informal nature, non-formal nature. And therefore, there is no need for excessive credentialization or certification or formalization. We would be making a mistake and losing out on the flexibility of the Anganwadi if they start becoming credentialized. However, at the same time, we need to recognize the training needs. We need to recognize, because one very important part of what we should recognize is that the Anganwadi worker is a community worker. She belongs to the same community. She is a mother among the mothers of that village. And that is a strength. If you're bringing in again teachers from outside, then again, that's not a community worker. That's an expert who's coming in from outside. Therefore, there is an important strength in the Anganwadi, the way it's designed. I think a 3-month or 6-month training in small distributed groups on the early childhood curriculum framework, as well as on teaching strategies, on organizing the classroom learning environment into different activity corners. These can benefit both public sector as well as private sector early childhood learning environments.
I just have a question related to this. While we're talking about the early childhood being education being a little bit unstructured, where the focus is more on care and all of these things, what we see is as soon as, for example, I never went to kindergarten. I mean, let me confess that as well. I never went to kindergarten. I got into school at 6. The thing is that what I found with my own daughter, with and with several children, is that when you go through an unstructured system, and then these children get into a completely different system. It's like they've been taken out of one type of system and pushed into another system that's completely disconnected from the earlier kind of a system. There seems to be a complete disconnect between the caring, nurturing kind of an environment that we are talking about within the early childhood system versus what they get into if they get into a even if it be a a government run school or a private school for that matter. So how do we address that? Here we're talking about organic learning in one sense, and there we suddenly
Yes.
get into this kind of structured do this, do that kind of a learning. So how do we bridge that
So,
disconnect?
yes, thanks for that. That's a very insightful question. And one of the good things that I've seen in the NEP is that it actually tries to prevent schoolification. Yeah, what you're talking about is really the schoolification of kindergarten, which it's a big debate across developed countries. There's parental anxiety across the world, because there are new challenges and everybody, education is aspirational, it's highly aspirational. Everybody wants their children to do well in the rat race and so on. And therefore, there's this trend towards schoolification of kindergarten, which needs to be really discussed, and more outreach needs to be done with parents to explain. Because in schoolification of kindergarten, as I've already mentioned, if we turn kindergarten into into a preschool and do worksheets, we'll be losing out a lot on the kind of learning that needs to happen in kindergarten: the social emotional learning, the learning to be a risk taker, the learning to be an adventurer. I mean, I remember my child in the play school that he went, when we had gone to Goa once, and there was a rope somewhere. It looked like a rope, but we couldn't be sure because there had been snakes in that park earlier that week. So he said, let me just touch it and find out. So that's the kind of risk taking mentality, fearlessness that we need to inculcate in children. And I think that's an important learning, because the ABCs will always come at some point. The numbers will come at some point. How do we, however, make the transition from a kindergarten unstructured, I wouldn't say unstructured, I would say they're actually learning some structure. It's not unstructured, but it's loosely structured. It's flexible. It's built around, it's child-centered, and it's built around the needs, child-centered and child-directed. So the child says, I will now go in an ideal Anganwadi with 6 activity corners. There'll be one arts corner, there will be one imaginative play corner, there will be one corner where they're learning to play with numbers and, mathematical tactile materials and count things and so on. So the child will direct her own learning or his own learning and say that now I will go and sit in this corner and I will play on this, because this is what interests me at this time. And that is something that some of the best models of early learning, like Reggio Emilia in Italy and so on, have been designed around. At the same, so it's not unstructured, it's loosely structured and child-directed. How do we transition to the school? I would say that that is something where we should stop putting the pressure only on early childhood, but also request school and demand that school also should change its mode of welcoming children in class 1. I know many people who've gone to, never gone to kindergarten formally, but gone to class 1 straight. And their children have done as well and learned as quickly and been as comfortable as children who have started play school or preschool at the age of 1.5 years or 2 years. There is no inherent advantage, except that some children may learn the formal elements of ABC or reading or something at some point. There is no inherent difference. However, what school can do and what it should do as per the right to education is to welcome every child, whatever way they are, whether they have learned their formal ABCs or not, whether they have learned to speak up in a certain professional, in a certain formal way, the school kind of way or not, whether they know where to put their bag or their glass or bottle. These are things that class 1 can teach and should teach. We have started expecting, and in fact, the school system has started expecting that children must come to class 1. And this has happened because of admission tests. This actually has happened because we are writing admission tests for class 1, especially in private preschools, where we are expecting children, and people, my own children got a sheet, one full page syllabus with 8 skills that they needed to learn. So I said that if I'm supposed to teach all this, what is the school supposed to do, right? there is nothing there which was developmentally appropriate. The school in class 1 is supposed to welcome every child, big or small, round or square, or whatever shape the child comes in, whatever abilities the child has, and build on those abilities. That is something that we need to do. And if, as the NEP envisages, if we can take that forward, I think into grade 1, class 1 and class 2 and 3, I think there will be a much better flowering of children's potential across the board till the age of 8 or 9. And then they'll get into middle school and start getting into a more formal structured. So I hope I've answered your question. I generally mean a loosening of primary school rather than structuring more of early education.
Yeah.
Now we are kind of running out of time. So one last question, and that from then on we could actually move to your closing remarks as well. The last question is kind of a complex one, has several components. You did mention the role of the parental community or the community as a whole in running the Anganwadi system, or their participation as a critical component in early childhood education. That now that has been mentioned in the RTE, the NEP does talk about it. As an RDPR principal secretary, how do you see the role of the Panchayati Raj in ensuring that public participation at running the Anganwadis better, or running the schools also for that matter, actually better? How do you?
Thank you for this question. I think that's really a very interesting question, and thank you for asking this. This is something I forgot to mention. In Panchayat Raj, what we have done recently is soon after COVID was announced as a pandemic, we set up a Gram Panchayat level task force, which has been very successful in communicating to the rural public about COVID and so on and so forth, taking measures to prevent the transmission, control the spread and so on. On similar lines, we started thinking that now that children have been out of school for so many months, what can panchayats do? Because not only what can panchayats do, what should panchayats do? Because as per Section 58 of the Panchayat Raj Act, it's very much a mandated duty of the panchayat to ensure that children are learning, they are enrolled in school, they are learning well, no child is out of school and so on. And therefore, it's very important that panchayats should support children's learning. So what we did was, we've just recently issued a circular with detailed guidelines along with the education department, setting up a Gram Panchayat level education task force. This education task force is chaired by the Adhyaksha or the administrator. Right now we have administrators of the Panchayat. It also has the Panchayat Development Officer, the PDO. It has all the school principals in that Panchayat. It has the SDMC chairpersons, who are typically parents. It has others from the education. It has the Asha, Anganwadi worker and so on. It also has one high school student, one boy and one girl, who are also, because we want the voices of children in that group. So this task force has the responsibility of ensuring, now there are informal learning spaces. Education department has got a Vidyagama program where open, well-ventilated spaces are identified, and teachers make physical visits to teach children who are wearing masks in open areas, wearing masks and clean hands and so on, to give them some lessons so that they don't miss their learning. This may not happen on the same frequency as school learning, but it's happening in such a way that they get connected with their education. Education department is also screening lessons on television, DD Chandana. So we found that 20 to 25% of many panchayat areas, the families don't have television at home. And therefore that is something that easily the panchayat can do. It can identify an open, well-ventilated space. It can provide cleaning. It can provide a television, either its own television or hire it or procure it, so that the children who don't have TVs at home can also follow the lessons and get these lessons at their own village while they are out of school. We also have mobilized the 5,600 Gram Panchayat libraries. We have said that all the libraries shall enroll the children, rural children, as members, all free of cost. All rural children will be enrolled as members we are having a big collection drive, and we have many foundations and NGOs helping us with this, to build up libraries, including digital libraries. They are giving us both physical libraries, physical books, as well as digital libraries, so that children can follow a small SOP with mask, hand washing, clean hands, social distancing, physical distancing inside the library, and they can borrow books. So now you will find the children of Mahatma Gandhi Narega workers, landless laborers, small farmers, marginal farmers, children of Anganwadi workers themselves and midday meal workers and so on. They will be able to come and borrow books from the libraries, from the Panchayat libraries, and get into the reading habit. We have also tied up with NGOs like BGVS, Azim Premji Foundation, Shikshana Foundation, and others, and we are hoping SVIM also will participate with us, to conduct once a month activities, regular activities in the library, so that the teachers and the children are motivated to talk about the books that the children are learning, are reading, and to improve the oracy, literacy, and language skills of the children. So all this is very much a part of Panchayat's responsibilities. And finally, we are doing 100% out of school children survey, because we find that not only there are children who are never enrolled, there are also children who have been forced to leave school right now because the parents have migrated back to the villages. And there are children whose parents cannot afford private preschool fees, and therefore they have to enroll in government school. So we are taking up 100% survey through the SHG women, who are themselves the mothers of children in the villages, to identify children who are out of school for whatever reason and ensure that they are enrolled back in the schools. This is part of RDPR's responsibility, and I'm happy to say that we are going to take this up in a very big way in the next coming few months.
Thank you, ma'am. One comment before we move on to your closing remarks. Today in late afternoon, I was discussing with our team, which has also been working with the government in the Vidyagama program. We have seen that the attendance in the Vidyagama program is hovering around 50% in the high school, that is especially in the 8th to the 10th grade, primarily because most of the kids in that high school age are employed for cotton plucking. So it would be great if there is an initiative from the RDPR, and we would be happy to partner to ensure that children's participation in the harvesting season does not hamper their participation in
Definitely. Thank you for that. I've made a note of it. We'll definitely take this up, and I'll discuss it further with you on this.
Thank you, ma'am. We would now move on to your closing remarks, and then for a vote of thanks from Dr. Balu.
I would just like to close by saying again how wonderful this initiative is. Thank you so much. I have found very, very insightful questions coming in both from the moderators as well as on the messages, comments. Very, very interesting. I think we should all work together for early childhood education to understand it more fully, to ensure that children are getting the benefit, as I said, of a flexible and a community-driven, culturally appropriate way of teaching children how to integrate into the formal schooling system. Because ultimately, even preparing children for formal school is one thing, but even preparing children, formal school is supposed to prepare children for life. And very often the formal school will never teach the children how to do sharing, how to stand in a line, all the children, there is a very famous book called Everything You Need to Know. Everything I Needed to Know, I learned in kindergarten. I think that's the name of the book. And sometimes if you think about it, those are really the most important skills. If we can give children a good foundation in the early years, both in terms of health, nutrition, immunization, as well as their self-confidence and their ability to gel with other children, I think we will be creating a great foundation for the next generation. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Back to you.
Thank you for the wonderful 1 hour of sharing on ECCI. So I must apologize for initially not recognizing that family iPad. I know you sent me a message saying family iPad. I thought you're signing it from your family's iPad. I didn't realize that was the name. So sorry for the few minutes delay, and also thank you all for bearing with that delay from the audience also. It has been, I know that I have known Mrs. Uma Mahadevan for a long time, close to the time since SVM started. And so I must tell you this, that amongst all the postings that you've gone through, I've virtually interacted with you throughout your career. I think I've seen you the happiest when you're in Women and Child Department.
Yes, that's true.
And so, I can really understand how much this means to you and how much, and others may not know about your Matrapurna program and other things that you did for not just children, but for women also. In that sense, I think there are a lot of success stories in your career, and hopefully you will also look at how education can truly be a panchayat responsibility in a real sense of the word. I know it's a big challenge across the country, despite having 73rd and 74th amendments and all the responsibilities supposedly to be implemented. But in terms of accountability and structures, it's not going to be easy, but it will be a great thing to happen. So I would like to thank you on behalf of SVYM for, you've always been a great friend, a great supporter. And despite your challenge of right now, the COVID and the crisis that you were under, you took the time off to be with us. It shows your conviction and commitment in children and women, especially in public service itself. So thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Thank all the audience, and any final words and announcements from Ramesh or Praveen, it's up to both of you.
Yeah, one final announcement is we have another big month coming up. Next month we have very stimulating lectures coming up. So do please log in every Saturday. And if you have any more questions to our speakers, you can write to me or Ramesh. Our email IDs are available here. And we would be happy to get feedback as well as towards the future sessions as well. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening and a great weekend.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.